Marcus Chen adjusted his thick-rimmed glasses for the 100th time that day, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the holographic display floating before him. The alien text seemed to mock him with its swirling patterns and impossible geometry. 3 months aboard the galactic research vessel Harmony's Edge, and he still felt like a fraud among the brilliant xenolinguists and anthropologists who made up the crew. The ship hummed with quiet efficiency as it drifted through the Kepler Nebula, its mission to establish first contact with the recently discovered Draconian Empire. Marcus had been selected not for his expertise in alien languages, which was admittedly limited, but for his unique ability to process and decode complex symbol systems. Back on Earth, he had been known as the Pattern Whisperer among his colleagues at the Institute for Theoretical Linguistics. Still working on those glyphs, Chen? Dr. Sarah Voss, the expedition's lead xenoanthropologist, peered over his shoulder. Her expression was kind but tinged with the impatience that had become common among the crew. They had been trying to decode draconian communication protocols for weeks without success. Marcus nodded, pushing his glasses up again. There's something here. The patterns aren't random. Look at this sequence. He highlighted a section of the alien text. It repeats every 47 characters, but with subtle variations. It's almost like what? Dr. Voss leaned closer. Like music. Like a song with verses and a chorus, but the melody changes slightly each time. Marcus's voice grew more confident as he spoke. Oh, what if their language isn't just text? What if it's multidimensional, incorporating sound, possibly even scent or electromagnetic frequencies? Before Dr. Voss could respond, the ship's communication array crackled to life. Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the research bay. All hands to stations. We've got incoming vessels. Draconian ships, and they're big. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he watched the main view screen flicker to life. 3 massive ships emerged from the nebula's swirling gases, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian. They moved with an organic grace that made human vessels seem clunky by comparison. Each ship was easily 5 times the size of the Harmony's Edge, their surfaces covered in the same flowing script that Marcus had been studying. They're attempting to communicate, reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The patterns match what we've been analyzing. Marcus stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward. Captain, request permission to join the communication team. I think I understand part of their linguistic structure. Captain Rodriguez turned to look at him, her weathered face skeptical. You're a pattern analyst, Chen, not a diplomat. With respect, Captain, I might be the only one who can make sense of what they're saying. Marcus's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady. Their language operates on multiple levels simultaneously. We've been trying to translate it like human text, but it's more like trying to understand a symphony by only reading the sheet music. The alien ships had arranged themselves in a perfect triangle formation, their positions shifting in subtle patterns that seemed to mirror the linguistic structures Marcus had been studying. As he watched, he began to see the connection between their physical movement and the text scrolling across his screen. They're not just talking to us, he whispered, his eyes widening. They're dancing their words. Dr. Voss grabbed his arm. What do you mean? The ship's positions, the way they're moving, it corresponds to the linguistic patterns. Their entire language is kinesthetic. They communicate through movement, position, maybe even through the electromagnetic fields their ships generate. Marcus turned to Captain Rodriguez. Captain, we need to respond not just with words, but with movement. Our ship's position, our engine output patterns, everything matters. The captain hesitated for a moment, then nodded. What do you need? Access to navigation controls and a direct link to our communication array. If I'm right, we need to speak to them in their own language. And that means moving our ship in specific patterns while we transmit. As the crew scrambled to set up the necessary connections, Marcus felt a familiar surge of excitement. This was what he lived for, the moment when seemingly impossible patterns suddenly clicked into place. He had spent his entire career finding order in chaos, and now that skill might be humanity's key to successful first contact. The largest of the 3 draconian ships began to move forward, its hull glowing with soft bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the signals they were broadcasting. Marcus watched the patterns, his mind racing to decode the complex interplay of movement, light, and electromagnetic radiation. They're saying hello, he announced suddenly, but it's more than that. They're introducing themselves, their culture, their intentions. The ship's movement pattern indicates peaceful greeting, while the bioluminescence is expressing curiosity, wonder. It's beautiful. Captain Rodriguez moved to stand beside him. Can you respond? Marcus nodded, his fingers flying over the navigation controls. Adjust our heading by 15 degrees starboard. Reduce engine output to 60% and pulse the outputs in this pattern. He uploaded a sequence to the navigation computer and broadcast this linguistic sequence while we move. The Harmony's Edge began to execute Marcus's commands, its movement becoming a carefully choreographed response to the alien greeting. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly, the three draconian ships began to shift their formation, their bioluminescent patterns growing brighter and more complex. It's working, Dr. Voss breathed. They're responding? Marcus felt a surge of pride and relief, but it was short-lived. The alien ships were moving into a new configuration, one that made his blood run cold. The patterns they were displaying had shifted from curiosity to something else entirely, something that felt distinctly hostile. Captain, he said urgently, I think we may have accidentally said something offensive. The lead draconian ship was now moving directly toward them, its hull glowing with angry red patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. Marcus frantically tried to analyze the new linguistic patterns being broadcast, but they were unlike anything he had seen before. What did we tell them? Captain Rodriguez demanded. Marcus's hands shook as he worked. I'm not sure. The linguistic matrix is completely different now. It's like they switched from one language to an entirely different one. Or maybe, he paused, a terrible realization dawning on him. Maybe we accidentally identified ourselves as something we're not. The draconian ship was close enough now that they could see details of its construction. The hull wasn't metal at all, but something organic covered in scales that shifted and moved like living skin. And along its sides, massive eyes were opening, each one the size of a shuttle bay, all of them focusing on the tiny human vessel. Those aren't ships, Marcus whispered. They're alive. The revelation hit the bridge like a shockwave. The three massive entities surrounding their ship weren't vessels at all, but living creatures of impossible size. Space dragons, Marcus realized, his mind struggling to process the implications. The scales along their hulls rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in complex rhythms, and those enormous eyes tracked every movement of the human ship with predatory focus. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the stunned silence. Chen, talk to me. What's our situation? Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, his analytical mind racing despite his fear. The communication patterns have completely changed. Before, they were greeting us as equals, maybe even with respect. Now, he gestured helplessly at the scrolling alien text on his screen. Now they're treating us like prey. The largest dragon, easily 2 kilometers from snout to tail, began to circle the Harmony's Edge with movements that were both graceful and terrifying. Its massive wings, translucent membranes stretched between elongated finger bones, created electromagnetic fields that interfered with the ship's sensors. Each wingbeat sent ripples through space itself, distorting the fabric of reality around them. Sir, we're being scanned, reported Lieutenant Torres, but not with any technology I recognize. It feels almost biological. Dr. Voss had gone pale. Marcus, is there any way to reestablish peaceful communication? To explain that we made a mistake? Marcus stared at the linguistic patterns flowing across his screen. The dragon's communication had become layered with aggression markers, territorial warnings, and something else that made his skin crawl. They think we're something called void hunters. The pattern indicates extreme hostility toward this classification. Whatever void hunters are, these dragons have very good reasons to fear and hate them. The second dragon, slightly smaller but no less intimidating, had positioned itself directly above the human ship. Its belly was lined with what looked like breathing vents, each one glowing with internal fire. The implication was clear even without translation. Captain, Marcus said urgently, I need to try something. Their language operates on emotional resonance as much as logical structure. If I can project the right emotional patterns through our ship's movements and communications, I might be able to convince them we're not what they think we are. Do it, Captain Rodriguez ordered. But be careful. One wrong move and we'll be space dust. Marcus took a deep breath and began inputting commands. The Harmony's Edge started to move in a complex pattern. its engines firing in controlled bursts that mimicked the breathing rhythms he had observed in the dragons. Simultaneously, he broadcast a carefully constructed message that layered multiple emotional frequencies: confusion, fear, but also curiosity and peaceful intent. The response was immediate and terrifying. The largest dragon's eyes blazed with sudden fury, and it opened its massive jaws to reveal row upon row of crystalline teeth. But instead of attacking, it spoke. The sound that emerged wasn't transmitted through their communications array, but somehow reached them directly, reverberating through the ship's hull and into their bones. Even that part hurts. The voice was distinctly feminine, ancient beyond measure and filled with a pain so profound that several crew members gasped. The dragon's mental voice continued, each word precisely articulated in perfect English. The human geek recoiled and went rigid. Marcus felt as if ice water had been injected directly into his veins. Somehow the dragon was reading his thoughts, his reactions, his very identity. The casual use of the word geek showed an understanding of human culture that should have been impossible. How? He whispered, his voice barely audible. How do you know our language? How do you know what I am? The dragon's massive head turned toward him, and he felt the weight of her attention like a physical force. We have been watching your species for millennia, little pattern seeker. We know your words, your thoughts, your fears. We know what you call yourselves, and we know what you truly are. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. What do you mean? What do you think we truly are? The dragon's laugh was like the sound of stellar wind through a nebula, beautiful and terrifying. You think you have discovered us, but we discovered you long ago. Your species carries the mark of the Void Hunters. The same genetic signatures, the same neural patterns. You are their children, their inheritors, their next incarnation. Marcus felt his world tilting. That's impossible. We evolved on Earth, we have fossil records, genetic history. Planted, the dragon said simply. Seeded. Guided. The Void Hunters have done this before on 1,000 worlds across 1,000,000 years. They create species in their image, then abandon them to develop naturally until they achieve spaceflight. Then they return to harvest what they have grown. The implications crashed over Marcus like a tsunami. Everything humanity thought it knew about its own origins, its place in the universe, was potentially a lie. They weren't explorers making first contact. They were the engineered descendants of something so terrible that these ancient dragons viewed them with horror and disgust. But we're not them, Marcus said desperately. We're different. We choose peace, exploration, understanding. We're not hunters or destroyers. The second dragon, smaller but with scales that shifted through colors that had no names, spoke for the first time. Your ship carries weapons. Your history is written in blood and conquest. Your very genetics scream of predator heritage. How are you different? Marcus felt his heart racing. Everything the dragon said was technically true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Yes, we have weapons, but only for defense. Yes, our history has violence, but we also have art, music, literature. We have love, compassion, sacrifice for others. We're capable of growth, of becoming better than what we were. The largest dragon's eyes narrowed. The Void Hunters said the same words when last we encountered them. They spoke of peace while their fleets burned our colonies. They offered partnership while their scientists dissected our young. Words are easy to speak, little human. Actions reveal truth. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Then judge us by our actions. We came here not with warships, but with a research vessel. Our crew consists of scientists and diplomats, not soldiers. We broadcast messages of peace and greeting, not demands or threats. And yet, the third dragon spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested great age. Your presence here follows the same pattern. First comes a small exploration vessel, full of curious scientists. Then come the diplomats and traders. Finally come the fleets and the harvesters. It is always the same pattern. Marcus realized that they were trapped not just physically but conceptually. The dragon's past experience with humanity's alleged progenitors had created a logical framework that interpreted every human action as part of a larger, sinister plan. No matter what they said or did, it would be seen as confirmation of their hostile intent. But then an idea began to form in his mind. The dragon's language operated on multiple levels, incorporating emotion, movement, and even quantum field fluctuations. If he could find a way to communicate not just with words, but with the fundamental honesty that could only come from opening his mind completely. There is a way, he said quietly, a way to prove what we truly are. The largest dragon's attention focused on him with laser intensity. Speak. Marcus swallowed hard, knowing that what he was about to propose could either save them all or destroy him. You're reading our thoughts, our emotions. You know human psychology, so you know that we're capable of absolute honesty when we choose to be. I volunteer to undergo complete mental contact. Let me open my mind to you entirely. See everything I am, everything humanity is, without barriers or deception. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Around them, the three dragons hung motionless in space, their bioluminescent patterns shifting into configurations too complex for human comprehension. The dragon's consideration felt like standing beneath a vast storm system, pressure building in the space between thoughts. Marcus could sense her probing the edges of his consciousness, testing the sincerity of his offer. The other two dragons had fallen silent, their bioluminescent patterns dimming to a soft pulse that matched the rhythm of distant stars. You understand what you offer, pattern seeker. The dragon's voice carried undertones of surprise. Complete mental contact means no privacy, no hidden thoughts, no comfortable lies. I will see not just your intentions, but every fear, every shame, every moment of darkness in your species' history. Are you prepared for that level of exposure? Marcus felt his hands trembling again, but he forced himself to nod. If it's the only way to prove we're not what you think we are, then yes. I'm ready. Dr. Voss grabbed his arm. Marcus, you don't know what this could do to your mind. Complete telepathic contact with an alien consciousness could drive me insane, yes. Marcus met her eyes. But if I don't try, we're all dead anyway. And worse, first contact between our species will end in violence and misunderstanding. He turned back to face the massive dragon. I'm ready. The dragon's enormous head tilted, studying him with those ancient eyes. Very well. But know this, human. If I find even the smallest trace of Void Hunter taint in your mind, if I discover that your offer of openness is itself a deception, I will not simply kill you. I will ensure that your death serves as a warning that echoes across space for 1,000 years. The contact began gradually, like stepping into warm water. At first, Marcus felt only a gentle pressure against his consciousness, a vast presence examining the surface of his thoughts. The dragon's mind was unlike anything he had imagined. It was ancient beyond human comprehension, layered with memories that stretched back through geological ages. He caught glimpses of civilizations rising and falling, of stars being born and dying, of the slow dance of galaxies across cosmic time. But the dragon was also examining him with equal intensity. He felt her surprise as she encountered his memories of childhood, of scraped knees and bedtime stories, of the simple human joys that had shaped his early years. She paused at his recollections of school, of being the awkward kid who found solace in patterns and mathematics while others played sports or socialized. Interesting. Her mental voice was softer now, curious rather than hostile. The Void Hunters never showed us their young. They claimed to have no need for childhood for growth for the innocence we see here. The contact deepened, and Marcus gasped as more of the dragon's consciousness touched his. He saw flashes of her own memories, cities of crystalline light floating among the clouds of gas giants, dragon children, their scales still soft and translucent, learning to fly between the rings of Saturn-like worlds, vast libraries where knowledge was stored not in books but in living songs that dragon scholars would memorize and carry across the galaxy. And then came the darker memories. The first appearance of the Void Hunters, ships that weren't ships but living things twisted into geometric abominations, creatures that looked almost like dragons but wrong in every detail, as if someone had tried to recreate dragon biology from incomplete notes and filled in the gaps with nightmares. Marcus felt the dragon's pain as she shared the memory of the first attack. Void Hunters descending on a peaceful colony world, not to conquer but to study. They had captured dragons alive, taken them apart piece by piece to understand how their biology worked, how their telepathic abilities functioned, how their connection to quantum fields allowed them to manipulate space-time itself. They wanted to become us. The dragon's mental voice was thick with old grief. They saw our abilities, our longevity, our connection to the cosmos, and they desired it for themselves. But they could not understand that our power came from harmony, from connection, from love of life itself. They tried to steal our gifts through violence and ended up creating only crude imitations. The contact went deeper still, and now Marcus could feel the dragon exploring the fundamental structures of his mind. She examined his capacity for pattern recognition, his ability to find order in chaos, his deep fascination with languages and communication, but she also found his fears, his insecurities, his moments of anger and frustration. "You carry aggression," she observed, touching on memories of schoolyard fights, of times when Marcus had wanted to hurt those who had hurt him. "You have the capacity for violence." "Yes," Marcus admitted, offering no excuses or rationalizations. "But look deeper. See what stops me." The dragon examined his memories more carefully, seeing not just the impulses toward violence but the choices he had made to reject those impulses. She saw his empathy, his ability to understand and care about the pain of others. She saw his wonder at the beauty of mathematical patterns, his joy in solving puzzles, his deep satisfaction in helping others understand complex concepts. "This is different," she admitted. The Void Hunters had no such restraints. Their aggression was pure, unchecked by empathy or compassion. They viewed other beings as resources to be consumed, not as individuals worthy of respect. Marcus felt her probing deeper into his species' history, examining humanity's long climb from primitive violence toward something approaching civilization. She saw wars and conquests, slavery and genocide, all the dark chapters that stained human history. But she also saw the gradual emergence of moral philosophy, of art and music and literature that spoke to higher aspirations. She saw humans sacrificing themselves for strangers, creating beauty for its own sake, reaching across barriers of language and culture to connect with others. "Your species grows," she said, wonder creeping into her mental voice. "You learn. You become better than what you were." The Void Hunters remained static, unchanging, locked in their patterns of consumption and destruction. The deepest level of contact began, and Marcus felt his consciousness merging with the dragons in ways that language couldn't describe. He experienced existence from her perspective, felt the flow of quantum fields that connected all things, understood how consciousness itself was woven into the fabric of space-time. The universe revealed itself not as a collection of separate objects, but as a vast, interconnected web of relationships and possibilities. And through that connection, the dragon experienced humanity through Marcus's eyes. She felt his wonder at the night sky, his childhood dreams of exploring space, his adult dedication to understanding alien minds. She experienced his love for his parents, his friendship with colleagues, his deep satisfaction in work that contributed to human knowledge and progress. But most importantly, she felt his hope, his unshakable belief that humanity could be better than its past, that contact with other species could lead to mutual growth and understanding, rather than domination and destruction. She felt his vision of a galaxy where different species work together, sharing knowledge and culture, exploring the cosmos not as conquerors but as partners in discovery. "This hope," she said softly, "this vision of partnership and growth, this was never present in the Void Hunters. They saw only dominance and submission, predator and prey. They could not conceive of true cooperation." The contact began to withdraw, leaving Marcus feeling strangely empty as the dragon's vast consciousness pulled back from his mind. But something had changed in the space between them. The hostility was gone, replaced by something that might eventually become trust. "You are not Void Hunters," the dragon announced, her mental voice now carrying tones of amazement. "You share their genetic heritage, yes, but you have transcended it. You have become something new, something better. You have chosen evolution over stagnation, growth over repetition." The other two dragons stirred, their bioluminescent patterns brightening as they sensed the change in their leader's attitude. Around them, space itself seemed to relax, the tension that had gripped the region dissolving like morning mist. But the dragon's next words sent a chill through Marcus's newly expanded awareness. "However, know this, young human. Your genetic heritage means that others of our kind will not be so easily convinced. And there are those among the Void Hunters who still live, still watch, still wait. They will not be pleased to learn that their experiment has developed beyond their control." Marcus felt the weight of the dragon's revelation settling over him like a lead blanket. The idea that humanity might still face judgment from their alleged creators, the original Void Hunters, was both terrifying and strangely liberating. If they were truly the children of monsters, then their evolution toward something better represented a victory against their very nature. "How many of them are left?" Captain Rodriguez asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had learned. The dragon's massive head turned toward the captain, her ancient eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. Unknown. The Void Hunters mastered the art of hiding in the spaces between realities. They exist partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to track or count. But we know they endure because we have felt their influence across the galaxy, subtle touches that guide the development of species they have seeded. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her scientific mind grappling with the implications. If they've been guiding our development, why haven't we encountered them directly? Why allow us to develop independently? Because that is their method. The second dragon interjected, its voice carrying harmonics of bitter experience. They plant seeds, then withdraw to observe. Only when a species reaches a certain level of technological advancement do they return to evaluate their creation. Some species they harvest for useful traits. Others they simply destroy if they prove disappointing. Marcus felt a surge of determination cutting through his fear. Then we need to be ready for them. We need to understand what they're looking for, what they consider success or failure in their experiments. The largest dragon's attention focused on him again, and he felt the gentle touch of her consciousness against his mind. Not the deep merging they had shared before, but a lighter contact that allowed for rapid communication of complex concepts. Through that contact, she shared images of other species the Void Hunters had created and evaluated. A race of crystalline beings whose perfect logic had impressed their creators so much that they had been elevated to serve as Void Hunter administrators. A species of energy manipulators who had been deemed too chaotic and subsequently exterminated. A civilization of hive-minded insects whose efficiency had earned them a place as Void Hunter foot soldiers. Each species was judged by how well they embodied the Void Hunter ideal, the dragon explained. Those who proved useful were absorbed into their empire. Those who proved deficient were eliminated to prevent the spread of undesirable traits. And what is the Void Hunter ideal? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Perfect predation, the ability to consume and assimilate everything they encounter, while maintaining absolute efficiency and control. They see the universe as a resource to be harvested, and they create species to help them do it more effectively. Marcus exchanged glances with his crewmates. By that standard, humanity would almost certainly be judged as deficient. Their tendency toward cooperation, their capacity for empathy, their love of art and beauty for its own sake, all of these would be seen as wasteful inefficiencies by creatures focused solely on consumption and control. When will they come? Captain Rodriguez asked. Soon, the third dragon replied, its ancient voice heavy with certainty. Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel, developed artificial intelligence, begun to manipulate matter at the quantum level. These are the traditional markers that trigger a Void Hunter evaluation. They may already be aware of your presence in deep space. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. First contact with the dragons had revealed not just the existence of other intelligent life, but the possibility that humanity's entire future hung in the balance of an evaluation by their own creators, beings who viewed them as nothing more than a potentially useful tool. There is hope, the largest dragon said, sensing their despair. You have achieved something the Void Hunters never anticipated. You have transcended your programming. Your capacity for growth, for choosing cooperation over domination, represents an evolutionary path they cannot understand or predict. Marcus felt his pattern recognition abilities engaging, seeing connections and possibilities in the complex situation they faced. They'll expect us to behave like them, won't they? They'll come prepared to evaluate a species focused on conquest and consumption. But what if we demonstrate something completely different? Explain, the dragon prompted. What if we show them not how well we can destroy or consume, but how well we can create and preserve? What if we demonstrate that evolution can move in directions they never considered possible? Dr. Voss caught on immediately. A proof of concept. Instead of trying to impress them with our military might or technological prowess, we show them what we've built together. Art, culture, scientific advancement achieved through cooperation rather than dominance. The dragons were silent for a long moment, their bioluminescent patterns shifting through complex configurations as they communicated among themselves at speeds that transcended normal thought. Finally, the largest dragon spoke. It is possible. The Void Hunters are ancient and set in their ways. They might not recognize the value of what you propose, might dismiss it as weakness or inefficiency, But if you could make them understand that cooperation and creativity represent a superior evolutionary strategy, it could change everything. Marcus finished, not just for humanity, but for every species they've created or might create in the future. The second dragon's patterns brightened with what Marcus had learned to recognize as excitement. There is precedent. Long ago, there was a species that managed to surprise the Void Hunters, to demonstrate capabilities they had not anticipated. The Void Hunters were so intrigued that they offered that species partnership rather than absorption or destruction. What happened to them? Captain Rodriguez asked. The dragon's patterns dimmed. They became Void Hunters themselves, corrupted by the power and perspective of their creators. But you have shown something they did not possess, something that might make the difference. What's that? Marcus asked. Moral restraint, the ability to choose not to use power even when you possess it. The species that achieved partnership with the Void Hunters did so by demonstrating superior abilities in conquest and domination. You would need to demonstrate superior abilities in creation and preservation, while refusing to use those same capabilities for destruction. Marcus felt the elegant complexity of the challenge, settling into his mind like a perfect mathematical equation. They needed to prove to beings who valued only strength that there was strength in gentleness, power in restraint, effectiveness in cooperation. It would require not just technological innovation, but a fundamental demonstration of what humanity could become at its best. We'll need help, he said. We can't do this alone. If the Void Hunters are as powerful as you suggest, humanity by itself wouldn't stand a chance of convincing them. The largest dragon's eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. You will not be alone. There are other species in this galaxy who have escaped Void Hunter attention, who have developed their own civilizations and capabilities, and there are some of us dragons who believe it is time to stop hiding, to actively oppose our ancient enemies. An alliance, Dr. Voss breathed. A coalition of species working together to demonstrate that cooperation can achieve what dominance cannot. Exactly. But know this. The dragon's mental voice carried undertones of warning. Such an alliance would represent a direct challenge to Void Hunter philosophy. They would not simply evaluate and judge. They would see it as a threat to be eliminated. Captain Rodriguez straightened, her expression hardening into the look of determination that had carried her through 20 years of deep space exploration. Then we'd better make sure our demonstration is convincing enough to change their minds before they decide to destroy us. The three dragons arranged themselves in a new formation, their bioluminescent patterns synchronizing into a complex display that spoke of alliance and shared purpose. Around them, space itself seemed to vibrate with possibility, with the potential for something unprecedented in galactic history. But even as hope bloomed in Marcus's chest, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, ancient intelligences were stirring, turning their attention toward the small blue world where their latest experiment had taken an unexpected turn. 6 months had passed since the first contact with the dragons, and the hidden moon base designated Haven hummed with activity that would have been impossible to imagine before. Built within a hollow asteroid in the shadow of Jupiter, the facility represented the most ambitious cooperative project in human history. But it was no longer just a human project. Marcus stood in the central observation deck, watching as a delegation of crystalline beings from the Resonance Collective worked alongside human engineers to install a new type of communication array. Their bodies composed of living geometric structures that shifted and recombined based on their thoughts, caught and refracted the artificial light into stunning patterns. Nearby, representatives from the symbiont gardens, a species that existed as a collective consciousness, distributed across millions of plant-like organisms, had grown an entire wing of the station from specialized biomatter that converted quantum fluctuations directly into usable energy. It's incredible, Dr. Voss said, joining him at the observation window. 6 months ago, we didn't even know these species existed. Now we're building technology that none of us could have created alone. Marcus nodded, his attention drawn to a group of young humans working with dragon hatchlings to design new artistic displays that incorporated both human aesthetic sensibilities and draconic quantum field manipulation. The hatchlings, only a few decades old by dragon standards, seemed to view the humans as fascinating older siblings rather than the potential threats their parents had initially perceived. The cultural exchange might be even more important than the technology, Marcus observed. Look at how the children interact. No preconceptions, no inherited fears or prejudices. They're creating something entirely new. Through the viewing window, they could see the latest addition to Haven's growing fleet. The ship was unlike anything in human space doctrine, its hull a flowing organic curve that seemed to breathe with its own life. Dragon biotechnology had been merged with human engineering principles and collective resonance crystals to create a vessel that existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum probability fields. The ship could phase between dimensions, making it nearly impossible to detect or attack using conventional methods. The Unity, Dr. Voss said, reading his thoughts. Captain Rodriguez is running final tests on the quantum navigation system today. If it works, we'll have our first truly interdimensional vessel. As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Rodriguez appeared on the observation deck, her face showing a mixture of excitement and exhaustion. The past months had transformed her from a simple exploration vessel commander into the de facto leader of the most complex, diplomatic and military operation in galactic history. The tests were successful, she announced without preamble. The Unity can phase between dimensional layers with 97% stability. More importantly, our Dragon advisors confirm that the ship's quantum signature doesn't match any known Void Hunter technology patterns. To their sensors, it should appear as something entirely outside their experience. Marcus felt a familiar thrill of intellectual excitement. That's exactly what we need. If we can demonstrate capabilities that don't fit their predictive models, it might force them to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about technological development. Speaking of which, Captain Rodriguez continued, we've received word from our deep space monitoring stations. Long-range sensors have detected anomalous readings in the outer system. Spatial distortions consistent with Void Hunter phase technology. The mood on the observation deck shifted instantly from excited anticipation to tense preparation. They had all known this moment would come. But the reality of imminent contact with humanity's creators still sent chills through the assembled group. How long? Dr. Voss asked. Difficult to say precisely. The distortion suggests they're still in the outer solar system, probably conducting preliminary observations. Based on the patterns, our Dragon advisors estimate we have perhaps 2 weeks before they make direct contact. Marcus turned from the window, his mind already racing through the preparations they would need to make. We need to activate the cultural demonstration protocols. Every species in our alliance needs to contribute something that showcases their highest achievements in cooperation and creativity. Over the following days, Haven became a hive of activity as representatives from dozens of species worked to prepare their contribution to what they were calling the evolutionary demonstration. The goal was to create a comprehensive display of what cooperative civilization could achieve, something so impressive and unprecedented that even the Void Hunters would be forced to acknowledge its value. The Resonance Collective constructed a massive, crystalline structure that could convert pure thought into mathematical harmonies, audible across multiple dimensions. When activated, it would broadcast the combined creative consciousness of every species in the Alliance, creating music that existed not just as sound, but as living mathematics that reshaped reality itself. The symbiont gardens grew a living library, vast organic computers that stored not just information, but the actual experiences and emotions of individuals from across the galaxy. Anyone who touched the library could experience what it felt like to see a sunrise through dragon eyes, to think with the distributed consciousness of the gardens, or to perceive reality through the crystalline mathematics of the collective. The dragons themselves had contributed something that left even Marcus speechless. Using their mastery of quantum fields, they had created a pocket dimension, a small universe contained within a space no larger than a basketball. Within that universe, they had compressed the entire evolutionary history of their alliance, from first contact to the present moment. Observers could literally watch civilizations meet, struggle with misunderstanding, then gradually learn to work together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. But it was the human contribution that Marcus was most proud of. Working with artists, scientists, and philosophers from across human space, they had created what they called the Choice Archive. It was a comprehensive record of every major decision point in human history, where the species had chosen cooperation over domination, growth over stagnation, understanding over ignorance, from the first human who chose to share fire rather than hoard it, to the scientists who had chosen to share their discoveries freely, to the explorers who had chosen to greet unknown aliens with curiosity rather than weapons. "It's beautiful," said Lyria, the dragon who had first made contact with the Harmony's edge. Her massive form was coiled around the central support structure of the demonstration chamber, her scales shifting through colors that reflected her emotional state. "You have taken your entire history, both the darkness and the light, and transformed it into a testament to the possibility of choice." Marcus stood before the choice archive, watching as holographic displays showed moment after moment of humans choosing to be better than their worst impulses. "The Void Hunters created us to be predators, but we chose to be gardeners instead. We learned to nurture rather than consume, to create rather than destroy." The final component of their demonstration was perhaps the most ambitious. Using technology that combined human artificial intelligence, dragon quantum manipulation, and collective resonance crystals, they had created what they called the Possibility Engine. It was a device that could calculate and display potential futures based on different philosophical approaches to existence. They would show the Void Hunters not just what their alliance had achieved, but what could be achieved if the principles of cooperation and mutual growth were adopted on a galactic scale. As the 2-week deadline approached, tension throughout Haven reached almost unbearable levels. Everyone knew that the next few days would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the future direction of evolution itself. Would intelligence inevitably lead to dominance and consumption as the Void Hunters believed, or could it evolve toward something higher, something that enhanced rather than destroyed the universe it inhabited? On the final day of preparation, Marcus found himself alone in the demonstration chamber, running through the presentation sequences one last time. The various displays hummed with barely contained energy, ready to show the Void Hunters wonders they had never imagined possible. Nervous? Lyria's mental voice was gentle, tinged with affection that had grown over months of working together. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've built, it all comes down to the next few hours." "Then take comfort in this," the dragon replied. "Regardless of what the Void Hunters decide, we have already achieved something remarkable. We have proven that cooperation can create wonders that domination never could. That consciousness can choose its own evolution, can transcend the limitations of its origins." As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began to sound throughout the facility. The moment they had been preparing for had finally arrived. The Void Hunters had entered the inner solar system, and first contact with humanity's creators was about to begin. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of species survival settling on his shoulders, but he also felt something else, hope. They had built something beautiful together, something worth fighting for. Now they would discover whether beauty and cooperation could triumph over ancient patterns of domination and fear. The Void Hunter ship materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system like a nightmare given form. Marcus watched through the long-range sensors from Haven's command center, his stomach churning as the alien vessel resolved into clarity. It was massive beyond comprehension, easily the size of a small moon, but its geometry hurt to look at directly. The ship seemed to exist in too many dimensions simultaneously, its surfaces folding back on themselves in ways that made the human eye water and the mind recoil. "It's not entirely in our reality," Lyria observed, her mental voice tight with old fear. "They exist partially outside normal space-time. That's what makes them so difficult to fight or hide from." Captain Rodriguez coordinated the response from Haven's command center, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "All Alliance vessels to defensive positions. Remember, we're not here to fight. We're here to demonstrate." The assembled fleet around Haven was itself a testament to what their alliance had achieved. Human ships flew in formation with dragon biovessels, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent communication patterns. Crystal ships from the Resonance Collective caught and reflected starlight in complex mathematical harmonies, while the living vessels of the symbiont gardens seemed to breathe with their own life force. At the center of the formation, the Unity waited, its quantum phase hull shimmering between dimensions. The Void Hunter ship's response was immediate and terrifying. Without warning, space around the alien vessel began to writhe and distort. Reality itself seemed to bend as massive tendrils of crystallized void energy reached across the solar system toward Earth. Each tendril was kilometers wide and moved with predatory purpose, probing the edges of human space like a spider testing its web. "They're scanning everything," Dr. Voss reported from her sensor station. "Not just our technology, but our biology, our culture, our entire development history. It's like they're reading Earth itself." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications. The Void Hunters weren't just evaluating humanity's current state. They were examining every step of human evolution, every choice the species had made, every path they had taken or rejected. It was a comprehensive audit of their entire existence. "Contact," announced Lieutenant Torres. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." The voice that filled Haven's command center was unlike anything from Marcus's previous experience with alien communication. It wasn't telepathic like the dragons, nor harmonically layered like the collective. Instead, it was perfectly human in its cadence and vocabulary, but utterly alien in its emotional resonance. It was as if someone had taken human speech patterns and drained them of every trace of warmth, compassion, or genuine feeling. "Children of Project Sapiens," the voice began, using terminology that made Marcus's blood run cold. "We acknowledge your achievement of Phase 3 development markers. Evaluation protocols have been initiated. Prepare for assessment of integration potential." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice carrying across the communication channels with deliberate calm. "We greet you as representatives of the Human-Dragon Collective Alliance. We request permission to demonstrate our species' achievements and potential contributions to galactic civilization." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. When the Void Hunter response came, it carried undertones of surprise and something that might have been displeasure. "Unexpected variables detected. Unauthorized alliance formation with non-project species. Explain deviation from predicted development patterns." Marcus felt his pattern recognition abilities engaging as he analyzed the alien response. There was something in the phrasing, a rigidity that suggested the Void Hunters were operating from predetermined scripts and expectations. They had come expecting to find a humanity that followed predictable patterns, not the cooperative alliance that had actually developed. "This is our chance," he whispered to Captain Rodriguez. "They're operating from a template, following predetermined evaluation criteria. If we can force them outside their standard procedures, we might be able to create an opening for real communication." Captain Rodriguez nodded and activated the communication array. "We understand that our development has exceeded your predictions. We request the opportunity to demonstrate why our path represents not a deviation, but an evolution of consciousness itself." The response was swift and sharp. "Demonstration protocols are not standard for Phase 3 evaluations. Explain the strategic value of proposed deviation." Marcus stepped forward, knowing that this moment would define everything that followed. "Because we have achieved something that your models cannot account for. We have transcended the predator-prey paradigm that defines Void Hunter civilization. We offer a demonstration of cooperative power that surpasses anything achievable through domination alone." The alien ship's response came not in words, but in action. The void tendrils that had been probing human space suddenly converged on Haven's location, moving with impossible speed across the vast distances involved. But as they approached the Alliance fleet, something unprecedented happened. The Unity phased into action, its quantum-shifted hull allowing it to exist partially outside normal spacetime. It moved between the attacking tendrils like water flowing around stones, its exotic matter hull literally passing through the Void Hunter weapons without harm. Simultaneously, the dragon vessels began to sing. The sound that emerged from their biohulls was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It was harmony made manifest, a musical expression of the quantum forces that held reality together. The void tendrils, composed of crystallized space-time distortions, began to resonate with the dragon song. Instead of attacking, they became part of a vast cosmic symphony that transformed the entire region of space into a three-dimensional musical instrument. The Resonance Collective ships joined the harmony, their crystal hulls converting the music into mathematical structures that painted geometric patterns across the darkness. The symbiont garden vessels contributed their own voice, a sound like growing things reaching toward sunlight, like life itself celebrating its own existence. And through it all, human ships maintained perfect formation, their crews working in seamless coordination with their alien partners. It was a demonstration of cooperation so profound, so far beyond anything the Void Hunters had anticipated, that their ship actually paused its attack. Analysis required. the alien voice announced, its perfect human diction unable to completely mask what Marcus recognized as confusion. Observed phenomena do not match any known technological or biological paradigms. That's because we're not using technology or biology alone, Marcus replied, his voice carrying across the communication channels with growing confidence. We're using something you never learned to recognize. We're using friendship. The word seemed to hang in space like a challenge. In the silence that followed, Marcus could almost feel the alien intelligence struggling to process concepts that had no place in their worldview. Friendship, cooperation, the willing subordination of individual advantage for collective benefit. These were ideas so foreign to Void Hunter philosophy that they literally could not compute their implications. Define friendship in terms of strategic advantage, the alien voice demanded. That's exactly the problem, Lyria interjected, her mental voice carrying across the communication channels with ancient authority. You cannot define friendship in terms of strategic advantage because friendship transcends strategy. It represents a choice to value another's welfare as highly as your own, not because it benefits you, but because it is right. The Void Hunter ship hung motionless in space, its impossible geometry flickering as if the alien intelligence was struggling with fundamental processing errors. When it finally responded, its voice carried undertones that Marcus had never heard before: uncertainty, doubt, the first cracks in an absolute certainty that had persisted for millions of years. Such behavior patterns would indicate critical system failures and optimal resource allocation protocols. Explain how inefficient empathy structures contribute to species advancement. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her scientific training guiding her response. They don't contribute to advancement as you understand it. They redefine advancement itself. Instead of measuring success by how much we can consume or control, we measure it by how much we can create, preserve, and share. Demonstration requested, the alien voice said, and Marcus felt his heart leap with hope. They had done it. They had forced the Void Hunters outside their standard evaluation protocols, created a situation where the ancient aliens were genuinely curious about something they had never encountered before. Prepare the evolutionary demonstration, Captain Rodriguez ordered, and throughout Haven, the greatest collaborative artwork in galactic history began to unfold. The evolutionary demonstration began with silence. In the vast space between Haven and the Void Hunter ship, all sound ceased, all motion stopped, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then slowly, like the first notes of a symphony written in starlight, the display began. The Resonance Collective's crystalline structure was the first to activate, its faceted surfaces catching and transforming the light of distant stars into something that transcended mere illumination. The crystals sang with mathematical harmonies that existed on frequencies beyond normal perception, creating music that was simultaneously heard, seen, and felt as pure mathematical truth. The sound painted equations across space itself, showing how consciousness could choose its own evolution, how intelligence could direct its own growth toward beauty rather than dominance. Marcus watched from Haven's observation deck as the dragon contribution unfolded alongside the collective's mathematics. Lyria and her kin began to weave quantum fields with their minds, creating pocket dimensions that blossomed like flowers in the darkness. Each dimension contained a compressed history of cooperation, showing how different species had first met in fear and suspicion, then gradually learned to trust, to work together, to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The symbiont gardens added their voice to the growing symphony, their bioships releasing clouds of luminescent organisms that formed vast living mandalas in space. Each organism was an individual consciousness, but together, they created patterns of thought and emotion that spoke of unity achieved without the loss of individuality. The display showed how diversity could strengthen rather than weaken a collective, how different perspectives could combine to solve problems that no single viewpoint could address. But it was the human contribution that made Marcus's eyes fill with tears of pride. The Choice Archive activated, projecting holographic displays throughout the region of space around Haven. Each display showed a moment in human history where the species had chosen cooperation over conflict, understanding over ignorance, growth over stagnation, from the first human who had shared fire instead of hoarding it, to the scientists who had chosen to make their discoveries freely available, to the moment when humanity had chosen to greet unknown dragons with curiosity rather than weapons. "Observe," Captain Rodriguez announced across all communication channels, her voice carrying the pride of an entire species. "This is what we have chosen to become. Not perfect, not without failure, but always growing, always choosing to be better than we were." The possibility engine was the final element to activate, and its display was perhaps the most powerful of all. Using the combined technological achievements of every species in the Alliance, it projected potential futures based on different philosophical approaches to existence. The projections showed two possible galaxies, one where the Void Hunter philosophy of dominance and consumption had triumphed, reducing the universe to a sterile collection of resources to be exploited, and another where cooperation and mutual growth had created a living galaxy, teeming with diverse civilizations that enhanced rather than destroyed the cosmos around them. For long minutes, the Void Hunter ship remained silent, its impossible geometry flickering as the alien intelligence processed concepts that challenged millions of years of established belief. When it finally spoke, its voice carried undertones that Marcus had never heard before: wonder, confusion, and something that might have been fear. "Analysis indicates impossible efficiency ratings for demonstrated cooperation protocols. Resource allocation shows net positive gains across all participating entities. This contradicts fundamental optimization principles." Marcus stepped forward, knowing that this was the crucial moment. "It contradicts your principles because your principles are incomplete. You've mastered the art of taking, but you never learned the power of giving. You've perfected control, but you never discovered the strength that comes from trust." "Elaborate on trust variable," the alien voice demanded, its perfect diction unable to hide what sounded like desperate curiosity. Lyria answered, her ancient mental voice carrying across the communication channels with gentle authority. "Trust is the choice to make yourself vulnerable to another, because you believe they will choose not to harm you. It is the foundation of all cooperation, the root from which all growth springs. Such behavior indicates critical defensive failures," the Void Hunter responded. "Vulnerability leads to exploitation. Cooperation enables parasitism. Only if you assume that all consciousness is fundamentally predatory," Dr. Voss interjected. "But consciousness can choose its own nature. It can decide to be cooperative instead of competitive, nurturing instead of destructive." The alien ship's response came not in words but in action. The void tendrils that had been held in abeyance suddenly contracted. Not in attack, but in what Marcus recognized as a defensive posture. The Void Hunters were afraid. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something that challenged their fundamental understanding of reality itself. "Your demonstration creates logical paradoxes in core operational matrices," the alien voice admitted, and Marcus could hear the strain in its artificial perfection. "If cooperation produces superior results to competition, then Void Hunter civilization represents suboptimal evolutionary development." "Not suboptimal," Marcus said gently, "just incomplete. You've explored one possible path for consciousness, but there are others. What we're offering is not the destruction of your civilization, but its evolution." The silence that followed stretched for what felt like hours. Around Haven, the Alliance fleet maintained perfect formation, their combined presence a living testament to the power of cooperation. The dragons sang softly, their harmonies weaving through space like threads of pure possibility. The collective's crystals pulsed with mathematical certainties that spoke of futures filled with wonder, rather than conquest. When the Void Hunter ship finally responded, its words carried a weight that seemed to bend space itself. Proposal received. Evolutionary development protocols require modification. Request extended contact for further analysis of cooperation paradigms. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. They had done it. Somehow, against all odds, they had convinced beings who had spent millions of years perfecting the art of domination that there might be a better way. But Lyria's mental voice carried a note of caution. "This is only the beginning, young pattern seeker. Changing a philosophy that has guided a civilization for millions of years will not happen overnight. There will be resistance, fear, those who prefer the certainty of the old ways to the uncertainty of growth." The Void Hunter ship was already beginning to change, its impossible geometry shifting into new configurations that hurt less to look at, as if the alien intelligence was experimenting with existing partially within normal reality, instead of outside it. Cooperation protocols require direct observation and analysis. Request permission to establish observation post within this system. Captain Rodriguez exchanged glances with the Alliance representatives. Permission granted, but with conditions. Any observation post must be staffed jointly by Void Hunter and Alliance personnel. No unilateral research, no secret projects. Everything must be done in the spirit of cooperation we've demonstrated today. Acceptable, the alien voice replied. And Marcus could have sworn he heard something almost like relief in its tone. Joint research protocols will be established, beginning with analysis of friendship variable. As the massive alien ship began to move toward a position near Jupiter, its void tendrils retracting and its aggressive postures shifting to something that might eventually become welcoming, Marcus reflected on the magnitude of what they had achieved. They had not just saved humanity from its creators. They had potentially changed the course of galactic evolution itself. Even that part hurts. Lyria's mental voice was soft, contemplative. The growing, the changing, the letting go of old certainties to embrace new possibilities. But it is a good hurt, the pain of becoming something better than what you were. Marcus nodded, watching as dragon hatchlings began to approach the Void Hunter ship with curious interest rather than fear. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But it was a future they would face together, as partners rather than predators, as friends rather than enemies. The human geek had recoiled in fear when first confronted with the dragon's pain, but he had not remained rigid. He had chosen to grow, to adapt, to become something more than his programming had intended. And in doing so, he had helped an entire galaxy discover that evolution was not just about survival of the fittest, but about the cooperation of the wisest. The stars sang with new possibilities, and consciousness itself seemed to smile at the wonders yet to come.